Welcome. This is Tampa Home Talk, and we've got another Friday edition lined up for you guys. A lot of stats, a lot of information.
Friday editions.
I know. This one's like it's a little extra special on the numbers. We're actually going to talk a little bit about some of the Florida realtor numbers, like in general, not just our local stats, but we're going to talk about Florida. So I know you're trying to bug out of here early, Mr. Adam.
Yep.
So I think we'll get into some of the Florida realtor stats, and then we'll get into. I got some really great questions this week from a client on insurance, and of course my answer. Well, I'll tell you my answer when we get to that part of the show. But all right, so our off-air number, if you'd like to connect with myself, Leo, Adam, any of our guests, is 813-377-2775. You can call or text us at our off-air number. And yes, Mr. Leo is back this week, just in time for the February stats. Aren't you excited about that?
I'm very excited about February stats. I mean, it was a small month, so February was a short month, but these are March stats. These are all March stats.
Well, I know, but we're going to get into like the Florida realtor stats from February.
Stuff.
Yeah, so
it takes them about 5 weeks to do stuff that's automatic.
Well, it's a lot of information that they have to compile and verify and all that sort of stuff. So go ahead and let's spew out our numbers for the week, Leo, and then we'll get into Florida realtors and then February.
Well, new listings are on the rise. We're at 660. Mind you, they're still much lower than they were this time last year. They are on the rise. We're starting to actually see it from our call volume for home inspections.
Are you?
Mm-hmm. So we are actually starting to see these actual numbers increasing.
Good.
Pendings are still twice the amount of new listings, and sold are still somewhere between the two. So we're looking at strong sold showings. We're looking at strong pending. We're looking at a rising amount of new listings, which is very nice to see. More people are shuffling around there in the Tampa Bay area.
What are the numbers coming in at so we can make sure we give that perspective for our 7-day trend?
Yeah, so last week we had 639 new, and this week we have 660. Last week we had 778 sold. This week we have 814. And pendings are about the same. Last week we had 1,034, and this week we have 1,062.
It's so crazy to me the pendings are always so strong, but we are seeing just some funky stuff in the market, like really flaky buyers and buyers agents and just weird, bizarre stuff. Like
too many baby realtors out there.
I mean, I literally fully execute a contract and then the realtor disappears, like poof, like got hit by a bus, nobody's answering the phone, like
had their feet dunked into buckets with concrete and thrown into the river.
Well, I mean, eventually it's like, okay, you didn't deliver escrow, so I guess we're pulling your contract and moving on, you know. But it's just some interesting, bizarre stuff we're seeing out there. Tampa's still really strong. We talk weekly about the numbers, but we'll dive into them a little bit more in depth and what that looks like for February, according to the Florida Realtor stats, because that was just published a couple of days ago. What we don't talk about very often is the stats for all of Florida. So that came out as well, and they're looking at some of these February trends, and it will be interesting to talk about this compared to how we look for the month of February. And so
if I might.
Yes, please interject.
One thing you want to take in mind with the new listings, if we go back to January, we have 451. So our market now has 47% more properties entering the market than we did this time in January. So that's actually a substantial increase if you think about it from a percentage standpoint.
Yeah.
So that means that...
Do you actually remember the numbers from last year, or like what are you saying?
No, I'm talking about the ones from January. Yeah, I do remember the ones from last year because they're numbers, and I'm kind of on the spectrum when it comes to numbers.
I can't believe you just, like, my brain does not store that stuff. I can calculate them just fine, but I don't want to
I store numbers.
Them. Yeah.
It's so much more reliable than people.
For me, that is just a waste of brain power. Like...
Numbers are never...
My brain is for processing, not for storage, Leo.
I'm just, like I said, I'm impressed that if you were looking for a home in January versus today, you have almost twice as many options. And that's important if I'm a potential buyer.
Well, the rates are significantly up, and we're going to talk about that too.
And gas prices are up, and minimum wage is up.
You missed the whole show on inflation. Remember how much we were chatting about that?
You will love that.
Yeah, we covered a lot of stuff.
Would have loved that.
Inflation.
We'll circle back because it's not going to go away anytime soon.
We'll send you the podcast.
So it's never going to go back. They're catching up on a decade's worth of... You've probably talked about that.
Yeah, low stuff. Yeah. You would have appreciated some of the stats, but you know, what year were you born? Just say it.
In the 1980s.
Before or after 82?
Before.
Okay. We were talking about how the price of a
Wii stages of the 80s
was the new thing, and it was cheaper than the Apple at $595 when it came out in 1982.
Well, I can remember back in the day when the Nintendo Entertainment System first came out.
The original.
The original. There was a yellow card that came out with it, and you filled out what your salary was, and you sent it back because they were just collecting data. But the salary range was like 0 to 15,000, 15 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 45.
For the whole year?
45 to 60, and that was all the brackets you got to choose from.
Wow.
And now if you're clicking one of those brackets, you're basically minimum wage, or you're basically in poverty if you clicked one of those brackets now. So that's just the way to show you how wages have increased in the past 40 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the increase, like the mandatory increase for minimum wage, like in recent months, like really. And it's going to continue to trend upwards. So it'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, Florida passed we don't talk politics here. This is a fact.
It's just a fact, yeah.
Florida passed a bill that minimum wage is going from $10 to $15 over the next 5 years.
That's significant. I mean, it's a 50% increase.
Well, I mean, most places that have the option to do it have taken away service positions by having, kiosks or whatever, self-checkout, order your own.
That was a logical choice, and I actually have to be in favor of it, because when my local grocery store cuts down the number of cashiers, so there's like 12 places where a cashier could be, and there's only 2 people there.
And there's a line and wrapped around the corner.
I kind of want the automated kiosk of 6 more virtual cashiers who are me. Well, I don't want to get in and out of the store.
I'm quicker. I always choose that lane at Costco.
I read a stat
I'm not quicker.
I read a stat somewhere too that basically the self-checkout, the retailers actually have less loss by self-checkout because people by nature will honestly ring everything, where if you go through a cashier, they may miss a thing or two or not quite scan it properly.
Did you know where self-checkout actually originated from?
Tell me.
This is interesting because it had nothing to do. It's turned into a way to reduce personnel and to increase efficiency.
They had to.
It originated at Walmart. And the reason why it came about was they realized that so many of their clients or customers going through the store were working in low wage or minimum wage jobs. The odds are most of them had cashier experience, so they gave them self-checkout to speed up the process because they figured people who worked in those professions would use self-checkout and be out faster.
I just prefer it too because, I like to stack things in the bags in just a certain way, and, you don't want eggs or bread on the bottom, that kind of stuff, so I enjoy it too.
Well, think about it. I mean, outside of professional services, right, and even some of that there's so many DIY options. I mean, look at travel. Look what happened in the travel industry.
Oh, yeah, the internet basically made the travel agent obsolete.
Yep.
Which is interesting because if you have an IATA number, you basically get a 10% discount on all your bookings. So it doesn't cost money to use a travel agent because they just take money you can't get a discount on anyway.
Right.
But people still barely use them, even though they serve a great use for putting together package trips.
I think it goes back to what you said, right? Like you think about the back and the forth and the waiting on the travel agent compared to, I need to book it, I just want to get it done, I'm done, and I can move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm booking a flight from here to Phoenix for the weekend, I'm going to do it myself. If I'm booking a
European vacation,
if I'm booking a European, let's say, 10-day vacation where I'm going to Germany, Prague, and Czechoslovakia to drink beer with 20 of my friends, which I am doing, by the way, in a couple months, I'm going to use a travel agent for that.
Prague was totally on my list before COVID.
You're going to need more than 10 days though in Europe.
I
spent 2 weeks. I felt like I needed 4.
You definitely, I would say, at least 2 to 3 weeks in Europe.
I'm still
time just to get there.
Still amazed that, and speaking of time to get there, you can get a direct flight from Tampa to Frankfurt. You can be there. Basically, you take off at 6 p.m. You land at 1 in the afternoon your time, or their time, which is like the morning your time. So you take that sleeping flight. It's actually shorter.
Don't sleep on the flight.
It's shorter to get from Tampa to Europe than it is to get from Tampa to California.
I believe it.
Well, I don't know. It just feels so much longer. It's just going that way is harder.
When you have the layovers and the time in the airport and all that, it's just... Yeah. And speaking, if you're looking for a travel agent, make sure you check the word travel to 813-377-2775. That's text the word travel to 813-377-2775. Katrina will get you hooked up with a travel agent from one of her B&I groups.
I'll give you a fun. I'll give you a fun fact. My degree is in travel and tourism. That's what my degree is in. I've never worked in that field one day in my life.
She has a degree in something to have people moving about, and she focused on keeping people staying put.
It was a lot more than that. But anyway, this is Tampa Home Talk. We'll be back, and we're going to jump into the February stats for all of Florida. And then we're going to talk about the housing market for right here in Tampa Bay as of February. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Project Engineering, bringing you the exciting Adam tip of the week.
Yeah, and he's actually gonna run out the door a little early today, so I guess we'll throw the insurance stuff.
He's like at the wedding when you cut the cake, you immediately leaves, but his cake is the tip of the week.
Oh, I love that. I appreciate that.
Did you see that little thing from Citizens that I added in here? Did you see that before?
I did. I was reading this. It's not. This is more opinion stuff other than what came from the CEO of Citizens. But it's not anything that we haven't already talked about, right? Where they're taking on so many new policies that, because we talked about the assessments, right? And that they're taking on more policies than they can feasibly, probably pay out if we have more than one catastrophic event to hit the state. I think if we have one, we should be okay. But, if we have one in back-to-back years, that could be a problem.
2004, like we did, we're done.
Yeah. I mean, we're not done, but they'll start assessing people. Now
Is that like a special assessment where they just say, oh, you owe us more?
Yeah.
Wow.
They'll basically send out invoices and good luck.
Wow.
Looking at that, there's no solution really in sight unless we have a couple, like I said, if we get a couple years without storms, get some new carriers into the marketplace.
Are we how we were before, where a lot of the carriers have pulled out of Florida?
Well, they're pulled out. They're in liquidation. I mean, we've had 2 carriers in the past month go to receivership, which means that they're insolvent. And
I have a question for you. Let me look this up real quick.
Yeah, while you're looking that up, the state says you can no longer do business. They go into liquidation. They have to get all their policies out by a certain time. The first one was St. John's. Now, they got bought by another carrier, so that's a smoother transition. Their book wasn't too terrible, but the other one was Avatar, and they're, totally.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Avatar. So one of our listeners, who happens to also be my corporate attorney, he emailed me and said that his insurance carrier, Avatar, has gone into the liquidation process. And as part of the process, all Avatar policies have been scheduled for cancellation.
Correct.
Effective April 13th.
Correct.
And
these are facts.
All those people are going to Citizens.
Not all of them. We've been able to rewrite some of them not with Citizens. It depends on the home, right? Depends on the home, age of the roof.
Mean?
What about the premium they prepaid for the year?
Yeah. So let's just directly address our corporate attorney's concerns. He was with Avatar. They're in liquidation. He's panicking.
Well, legit, insurance is paid a year in advance. So let's say he renewed that premium in November or December. What does that mean if there's no insurance as of April? They've lost their money?
No, they should get the unearned premium back. But the good news is, with a lot of these people going to Citizens, and you'll see it from your side on the inspections, they've loosened up some of their restrictions, especially when it comes to inspections. So usually when we go to write a Citizens policy, we need to have a clean 4-point ahead of time. Citizens is allowing for up to 60 days after the fact to get the 4-point in. So
that's good. That's really helpful.
Let's say you get the 4-point and you're like, oh, well, this is great. Didn't realize I had double taps because, my uncle came and fixed something on my 20-year-old house 15 years ago. Well, now you have time to go get that done. So little things like that help. But, we've actually seen, I will say, I've had a few carriers recently where the rates on homeowners have been good, like surprisingly good. So that's encouraging. Now, I think it's what you're seeing is they're really they're getting tighter on the underwriting, and they're realizing where the pricing is. And also they're opening up some acceptability when the roof is older, so long as you sign up for that roof replacement schedule.
What do you mean roof replacement schedule?
Well, it's
not
what we've talked
excluded?
about. We've talked about it before. It's where
I thought it was like an exclusion.
no, it's where the roof is going to be covered on actual cash value, which is depreciated value.
Okay.
So instead of your 18-year-old roof being replaced at 100%, it's replaced at, I think 50% is the lowest it goes, or 35 or something like that. But
Do they require you to get it replaced at a certain time?
they still could if it's beyond its useful
some of
life,
these
but
old roofs I've
probably
seen-
not if you have the endorsement.
Not most of them, but a lot of them I've seen. And Leo, you probably have bumped into this too. Some of the older, like tile or metal roofs, are in great condition. There's no reason to replace them.
We're more specific. This is more specifically talking about.
Shingle?
Yeah, because it'll still happen at a certain age for the tile and metal roofs, but you're talking 20 years, not 10 years, right?
But Leo, you've got to have seen some 20-year-old metal roofs that were fine.
Most of them are.
Most of them. I
Most
have
of
a
them.
40-year-old metal roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why can't you get a policy with exclusions on the roof? I mean,
This is better than an exclusion. You wouldn't want an exclusion.
Yeah, you don't want an exclusion for your roof.
Yeah, this is way better than that. And this
yeah,
is something
but
that if they pass it
my question is,
legislatively,
like Leo said, his roof is 40 years old. What happens? Is Citizens your carrier by chance, or do you know?
I don't believe I'm with Citizens on my house. I believe I'm with Citizens on everything else now.
So what if your insurance carrier goes, oh yeah, we don't like your 40-year-old roof? Like, but you're looking at your roof going, yeah, my roof is fine. Like,
So-
in your mind, how much longer do you think your roof has? Being that it's metal, it's 40 years old. Metal
That's-
really can be like lifetime.
I would say another 20 years. I mean, I would take a look at it from the standpoint of you knew what my roof was when you insured my property.
Right.
You knew what the condition of my roof was when you insured my property. You insured my property.
well, the other way to do it too, and this is what Citizens does, is they're real big on the useful remaining life, right? So if you get under 3 years on that useful remaining life, they either want to see it replaced or they want to see that it still has, more than 3 years. So you'd get a roof certification that says, yes, this roof is good for another 5 years. And then in 2 years, you're going to get that same letter. So basically, you're kicking the can down the road, but once it's
But I mean, if the roof is good and it doesn't need to be
if the roof
replaced,
is good, then you don't have a problem.
yeah,
But if the roof
I've
needs
got
to
an
be
issue with the
replaced,
insurance carrier saying it should be replaced just based on age.
I mean, that's
They're
what
not-
the insurance companies do. I mean, you look at the WinMit form. The WinMit form has your little boxes you check off, and then they punch that in a computer, and they calculate risk, and then they spit out a policy discount. I mean, it's all about check boxes and about statistical averages.
There should be some common sense.
I mean, back to Avatar for a second. One of the reasons why Avatar is in liquidation is they didn't increase the dwelling costs
no,
over the years.
it's very true.
So what that means is basically I have a $100,000 home 10 years ago, and the home gets demolished. It's going to cost me $200,000 to rebuild. They never increased the costs over those 10 years to get to that 200, so they weren't collecting enough money. So when they had claims, what they thought they had collected in premiums wasn't nearly enough.
They should
Yeah.
collect in line with the
well,
numbers for the area.
every single one of them, except for them, goes up 2 to 5% every year.
That's
sometimes
not
more
enough.
than that.
When you've been
Well,
looking at
it's-
how much our values have went up, 2 to 5% is not enough.
Well, it's
Okay,
different. It's different. One thing is replacement cost,
Yeah.
which is the cost it would take to actually replace your home,
Right.
versus the cost of how much you could sell your home for.
Yeah, the value of
Look
the
at
land
that
is going
price
up
right
a lot.
now. I mean, supplies are expensive. Everything's expensive.
Okay, but on the flip side of that, they do it regardless of the market, right? So you could have a home where it's like compounded interest, right? So you plenty of, especially say 3 or 4 years ago, where the building costs had kind of leveled out, but these homes had been increasing in value as far as the dwelling limit. So you had a home that was 200,000 10 years ago. Now it's 350. The real cost to rebuild it is probably 275 to 300. Now you're over insuring the house, and they're not going to pay 350 if it only
Yeah.
costs 300.
The easiest
it
way to
works
put it is
both
that
ways.
car commercial where they're showing like what you think you have insurance for, and it's like they show like a small 2-door sedan, and it's like what you actually have insurance for, and they show you a $200,000 sports car.
Right.
It's along those lines, but in reverse.
Correct.
Okay.
So, but it works both ways now, because I did that as a tip a couple years ago. Is hey, you get your renewal. So if you've been with the same carrier forever, it might be a good time to requote, just because, again, you could have been paying more. last couple years, I get a lot of people, hey, I think I'm underinsured because the cost of materials is going way up. Instead of increasing the dwelling limit, we added increased replacement cost, which is an endorsement that goes 10 to 15% above your dwelling limit, in case it costs more for the materials.
Got it.
So let me ask you this question. Some people are doing actual replacement cost and some people are doing replacement or actual value versus replacement value. So what's the difference between an actual value and a replacement value?
Well, actual value is, your depreciated value. Replacement cost is basically new for old.
So what I want is to have replacement, not actual.
Correct. Unless you own the house outright and it's an investment, and then at that point, you're covering for what's there, but you're not really concerned about what, you're going to rebuild something different afterwards, and that's just kind of getting you the foot in the door on the...
So now to complicate things, I'm in an HOA. How come most HOAs want to do actual instead of replacement?
They shouldn't.
They want the lower premium.
Well, that's why if we get a townhouse, even if it's a condo style, we still write an HO3 because they're not actually insuring what they're supposed to be insuring.
Right.
So when we come back, we're going to talk about Joe and Leah. They're actually moving here to Tampa from Colorado. Their budget's around $425, looking for a 2,000 square foot home. And they sent me some really great insurance questions. We're going to talk about
I'll answer them before I bounce.
We're at 813.
We're going to keep him the whole hour. This is an Adam hour.
2775. Call or text 813-377-2775. Again, 813-377-2775. This is Tampa Home Talk. We will be right back, so stick around. Well, welcome home. This is Tampa Home Talk. We're so glad that you are back. And to pick up where we left off before we throw Adam out the door.
We're trying to keep Adam here for the whole hour. We're
going to talk about Joe and Leah. We're not going to make him late, okay?
Yeah.
So some of the questions in this are like common misconceptions when people move to Florida in general, right?
Right.
So they're moving to Tampa from Colorado. We're obviously a peninsula. They are not. Budget's around $425. Some of them have some culture shock on what they can actually buy for that. And his questions were, hey, I'm starting to look around online at the houses that you're sending me, and I'm trying to estimate property taxes, which we've got a great show lined up on that in the future. And he wants to know about homeowners insurance. He's like, what's the homeowners insurance landscape out there? How much should I be budgeting for insurance? And is it common to get flood insurance? If so, how much does that run?
That's a lot of questions. Why don't we slow this down and just ask them individually?
And how much does the standard homeowners insurance run out there? And I was like, well, those are wildly different answers.
So let's start here. $425,000
gets you a nice house.
It gets you a decent house, but it depends, right? It depends on the age of that house. If it's a 1,000 square foot bungalow in Seminole Heights, you could be looking at $3,000 a year for your insurance because it's a 100-year-old home.
And that's all wood.
If you are talking about a 2012, newer construction home
in Wesley Chapel,
probably maybe $1,500 to $2,000. It just depends on where it's at, that kind of stuff.
The safe things at those price range. We're not talking about a flood zone because you can't get a flood zone house at 2,000 square feet for $425.
Correct.
Well, people always think just because we're a peninsula, everything is in a flood zone here.
Well, you get people from out of state that are scared about it. And
that is a true statement. Flood zone X is still a flood zone.
It's still a flood zone.
So yes, everything in Florida is in a flood zone.
Doesn't require
but by that same thing, so is everything in Colorado. That being said,
well, you never know when there's going to be an avalanche.
That's true. That being said, when it comes to flood insurance, my tip to everybody that's not in a flood zone, especially if they're moving from out of state, is wait till we get in our summer weather pattern, okay? Starting in June, pretty much all the way through September, it's going to rain every day at 3 o'clock. When we get those big torrential rains day after day after day, go into your neighborhood, see how the water pools. Does the water stay there? Does it drain? How does your street drive? If you have a hard time getting up and down your street after one of those storms, go ahead and get a flood insurance policy because if we get something, what was it, Harvey that sat over Houston? What was the one that sat over Houston? Harvey. Sat over Houston, 5 days, 60 inches of rain. Doesn't matter where you live, that's a lot of rain. It's not going to drain very well. That's the situation you're trying to prepare against. If it's a newer home, we could probably add it as an endorsement. somewhere in the $300 to $600 range.
Are they looking at elevation certificates anymore, or did that go away?
They still do elevation certs because we see them all the time and we need them all the time.
You don't you don't have to have one. However,
to get flood quoted,
not to get an insurance rate, but it could certainly help. So if it's built anytime after 1980 and you're in a flood zone, get the elevation certificate.
Well, you need it if you want to do permits on your house. Like if you're going to modify your house in any way, they make you get one because you want to know what the base flood elevation is.
Correct.
And then you want to make sure that your lowest point of ground or your lowest point of machinery is above that base flood elevation.
Well, and they've changed it. So I have a person that I insure in Harbor Island. And that house is built in 95, 98, somewhere around there. He bought it 2 years ago. He sent me the original elevation certificate. Home's at 12.1. The base flood elevation was at 11. Well, now the base flood elevation on the new one, I think it's like 12.5 or something like that. So it's gone up 1.5 feet. Obviously, this house was built to code originally, not built to code now. So when I quoted it, and that changed within the past year. He didn't originally, he bought the house in cash, didn't originally get a flood insurance policy. My original flood quote from a year ago, $700, $800, something like that. Go to quote it now, $6,000.
Oof.
So it just depends. I would say for them,
he's like, I'm paying cash for the rebuild.
Yeah.
And back to your statement earlier, the best 2-week period to look around your neighborhood and see how it floods is going to be the last week of July and the first week of August. That 2-week period is when your water table is the most saturated in this section of Florida as it would be for the year. That's where even your passive, easygoing afternoon 3 o'clock storms will start to flood the streets. During that 2-week period, I mean, you think back to 2016 in August, we had massive flooding in Tampa because the water table was so saturated.
Tampa was nuts. You couldn't even get down there.
And that is a prime time to still wait the 30 days before we get into when we're at the biggest risk for hurricanes, right? Because that's usually late September,
early October.
So then you still got your 30 days. To answer their question, I've been telling all of my mortgage referral partners, all my realtors, tell your clients $200 a month for insurance. It will be in that range somewhere, but at least if you're budgeting for that, you won't be shocked with whatever you get, and you might be pleasantly surprised, as opposed to thinking it's going to be $100 and now it's $300. Now you're SOL. Their biggest shock coming from Colorado, it's going to be on their auto insurance if they have kids. Yeah.
Really?
If they have kids.
Oh, yeah.
If they have kids.
I mean, we get people from the Midwest, and they come down and, they...
Like driving kids,
yeah,
right?
Well,
kids.
even with no kids, they're paying $1,000 a year up there. We're paying... I mean, shoot, $1,000 every 6 months would be a pretty dang good policy down here.
Well, let me ask Pat. Pat, are you there? Guess he's not there.
Mr. Yeah. Pat George, are you doing
I was going to have him ask about traffic conditions yesterday because it rained all day yesterday and see how many accidents were on the road yesterday. And that's why our driver's insurance is so much.
Yeah. And a lot of people are still working from home. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, so
Well, you can't get into a car accident if you're working from home.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like if people ever go back in full force to the office,
I think that's the insurance piece that a lot of people from out of state don't understand is going to be probably the bigger sticker shock to them. They understand, you have hurricanes, it rains, the insurance is going to be higher. Like they get it on the homeowners.
It's not like they can just cancel their insurance because public transportation is not really a thing here.
So then they get the auto rate. They're like, oh my God. I'm like, this is pretty good. You don't know what I'm paying. This is pretty good, man.
I've been in Florida so long. My whole driving life has been in Florida, so I don't know about lower rates in other states.
I know, same. Yep, always lived here. Never lived anywhere else.
I mean, I wish I was only paying $1,000 a year.
I just expected it to go up when I had teenagers, and here we are. It just never went down.
I mean, God, I'm this poor guy I quoted yesterday. It's just him and his girlfriend and his son.
The son.
The son's driving record's probably better than the two adults.
Oh, jeez.
$6,000 for 2 months or for 6 months, so $1,000 a month basically. And that's if he pays it in full.
They better be getting a job contributing toward the insurance.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I hear those numbers for insurance, and I'm like, yeah, for auto insurance. I'm just used to seeing it really high. And is that because Florida's a no-fault state?
The no-fault thing, the reason why that's an issue is because that's what the attorney, like, if you call I'm not going to give any names out there, but if you call any of these PI firms, right, especially that are in these networks, well, all of a sudden, that little fender bender, $10,000. You're getting that PIP without a doubt. You're gonna go to the chiropractor. The chiropractor is gonna run all these stuff. Mm-hmm. You're gonna need some physical therapy. They're at least getting the $10,000 out of it. So every time you get in an accident and you call one of these PI firms, and there's some really great ones out there. I don't want to say anybody by name, and they do serve a really good purpose. However, you gave them a $10,000 minimum.
That leads me to a question that we talked about in the last segment. Mm-hmm. So Citizens has publicly stated they want to lower costs. Are they still going to spend $80,000 fighting a $12,000 roof claim?
You need to show up at some of the meetings, Leo,
that was their marching orders, was to fight everything, take everything to trial, do extra depositions, do extra challenges with extra hearings. So if they really want to cut costs, then they probably should wind back the over-aggressiveness at fighting the claims.
I don't disagree. I mean, you see it from both sides, right? It's the 1%. It's any industry. Yeah. It's the 1% that ruin it for everybody else, right? Because you do need people like Aaron out there that are advocates for the consumer. That,
speaking of which, she's saying make sure that you don't sell roof schedules if you can avoid it.
I understand that, but you gotta, and I agree, but you gotta compare it between a $2,000 policy with a standard carrier versus a $4,000 policy with Citizens. That $2,000 a year that they're saving is
we're in such a litigious society. I mean, my car is still in the shop being repaired from where my daughter got into an accident in late December. And I ran into a couple of guys I know yesterday from that networking group, and they're like, "Oh, well, are you suing the insurance company?" I'm like, "No, nobody got hurt. They're fixing my car. That's what we're doing."
Exactly.
And they're like, "Well, it's a minimum $10,000 you can get." I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that. There's way too much of that.
Exactly.
No one's hurt. We're just gonna get the car fixed."
PIP is a good thing because people at least do have some coverage guaranteed, but it just everything gets abused, unfortunately. Yeah. So
don't do it, guys. If you're not hurt, don't make a claim.
Well,
or you're not.
Do you know how many calls I get where it's somebody's like, "Oh yeah, somebody put a door hanger on my front door, and they said they could get me a free roof through insurance," and it's like, okay, well, is your roof leaking?
Yeah, don't do that.
You know what I mean? Like,
if it looks like a scam and it feels like a scam, it's probably a scam.
Well, then everybody in their neighborhood has a new roof, and they're like, then they're like, oh well. Yeah. I'm the honest person now. I'm getting screwed because I don't have a new roof and blah, 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 blah. And that's kind of how it spirals.
I mean, that's kind of there was one law that passed, I think, 2 years ago or statute that passed that prevented roofers from door knocking. And I have to agree with that one because there would be times I would show up for roof claim inspections. And I'm like, so why did you file a claim? He's like, well, my neighbor did. Or someone told me to.
I'm winning the roof lottery.
I'm like, are you leaking on the inside? They're like, no. I'm like, well, I can't help you.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't help you because your neighbor got a roof. And you don't have any interior damage. I'm not helping you.
Yeah, people like me that literally probably should have pushed to get a roof replaced, but just paid for it out of pocket.
Well, and then you need Aaron for the people that it's legitimate, and then they want to fight it like it's not, and then the honest person gets screwed over, and the people that are, like you said, playing the lottery don't. So it's I see it from all sides, but.
Yep. All right, so we're going to talk some Florida Realtor stats real quick.
No, we're not, because we have the
break.
We did have another great Adam Tally hour. I appreciate it.
Into the last.
This was
not even 15 minutes.
My goal was to keep Adam here as long as possible by talking insurance.
You did great.
You won. All right, this is Tampa Home Talk. Our off-air number, in case you got some of these insurance questions, Adam is a really good go-to for the answers. 813-377 2775. He's definitely our go-to. I know I use him, and so does Leo.
And if you want to escape Florida, not permanently, but temporarily, remember, you can still text the word travel to 813-377-2775. That's 813-377-2775.
You can text us if you like Leo shenanigans or you think you should stop.
What? The travel agents is a legitimate thing.
What are you going to this weekend? The Grapes of Wrath? What was it?
The Grapist Showman at the Tampa
Grapist
Theater. It is
Showman,
a fundraiser at the Tampa Theater that happens to have a movie playing. We'll be right back. Welcome home. This is Leo Kane. Now that we've talked about inspection for 30 minutes, we're going to talk about how you qualify for insurance and why that 4-point inspection is so important.
Are you saying that you want to skip the numbers?
I want to just
from all of Florida?
Save the numbers for next
February?
week.
You want to save them?
We've moved into an insurance-based and an inspection-based.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you've been patiently waiting for this and you're like irritated that we're out of time to cover it,
then you blame me. Blame Leo.
You can listen. Call or text us. I'll send you the report ahead of when we're going to cover it.
And you can send that by zip code too.
Yeah, I can. Or your area. 813-377-2775. 813-377-2775. We are going to cover it. It is a lot of material.
So I'm going to take you up on that. I want to know my area, which is 33605.
I'll get it for
I
you.
want that emailed to me. I want to know what's going on in my area.
You got it.
I'd like to fully understand what's happened in my area, know what's going on with prices, decreases, increases.
It'll give you
also.
all of this juicy
I want that.
meat. I know
so
you do.
I'm going to text 33605 to 813-377-2775.
Or your zip if you want to get it.
That is my zip.
No, person listening, not
Okay.
you. The
I'm
person
going to
listening.
definitely text it.
If you would like information on your zip code, we can give you all these fun facts. It's literally probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 page report, maybe 12.
I'm curious. I'm very
It's got
curious.
a lot of really great data in there. Even if you don't like data or numbers, most people would really enjoy that, I think. Don't you?
I definitely would, but I don't
Everybody
think...
wants to know about their home
See?
in their area.
I just did it.
Yep.
I've texted.
Oh, jeez. Okay. We'll make sure you get that, Mr. Leo.
I'm very curious. Now, ask me these. So basically,
All right,
when
so
you're
one of the
qualifying
questions I have-
for insurance...
Well, hold on. So Kay was out, right, for
Right.
3 days this week. So we had one of these that's like, it's been lingering because in the inspection, the inspector said, yeah, there's just a couple double taps. So we sent it to the electrician and we're like, hey, a couple double taps, can you get in there and fix that? Somehow we're waiting all this time for the electric panel. They can't get a new cover. Oh, wait, we should probably change the whole electric panel. There's been a lot of that. Like the electricians, we were sending them out to do a minor repair from the inspection, and they're like, I'll just change the whole panel. Do you have thoughts on this? Or
No,
like,
it depends. There's reasons why you would want to change the whole panel for a double tap. So let's say you have a simple breaker, and it's got 24 slots, 12 on the left, 12 on the right. And all of those slots were full, and you added a pool. And now you need to add 3 more wires. So now you've double tapped 3 of the 24.
just tapped into 3 of the breakers.
You
that were
basically,
there.
what's
borrowed
happening
them.
is there's not an empty slot for you to put more power in. You put more power in by just doubling up. Now that's bad for several reasons. When the 2 wires are connected, you can have a short circuit. You can have an arc fault. And basically, power can backfeed through the 2 wires because power moves in all directions. So very dangerous. You can cause a fire from a double tap.
Would a
I'm the electrician.
homeowner know some stuff is going on in their home? Like, would they know from some other signs?
It's tricky because, like, there's times where, let's say you're in a townhome, and I go into the bathroom and I push that little button that says test. And then I'm in the downstairs bathroom and I push the button that says test, and my grandmother upstairs says, power's out in my bathroom. That's a circuit. So a circuit will travel through multiple outlets or multiple lights. You have the living room, dining room, kitchen light circuit all on one breaker. The only way you're going to find a double tap is, let's say I run my stove and my air conditioner turns off.
Yeah, those are big ones.
Or I run my microwave and my pool motor shuts off. Those are things that logically shouldn't be on the same circuit. Odds are those are double tapped. One of them gets overloaded, circuit pops to shut off power so it doesn't blow up.
So if something's snapping in your breaker box,
You might have a double tap. I mean, the only way to really see is to open up take off the dead front, and it's called a dead front because it kills people back in the old days. That's why it's called a dead front. So you take off the cover, and you can see if you have two little wires connected to one breaker. Mm-hmm. So I can see why an electrician in that sense would say, hey, we need to replace your panel. Now, what they could do instead, they can add a sub panel. So instead of replacing the whole big panel,
and that's less expensive, for sure.
You take you put a little panel, maybe a little 60 amp guy, next to the big panel. You move some of the breakers wiring from one panel to the other, and then you don't have to put a whole new panel in. You're still putting a new panel in, but not a whole new panel.
You know, that's exactly what they did at my house, but now every time I touch the big breaker, it's always red hot.
What?
The big panel.
So what Pat's talking about is now we've got a difference between do we have enough slots or how much power is being drawn. So you have a 125 amp breaker. So you can draw 125 amps of power. What Pat's talking about is they ran out of room. They gave him another box, but he's overall drawing more than 125, so it's running hot. So in that sense, you would have to change out your panel and upgrade it from 125 to 200 because the panel itself can't hold the electricity. Just because you've created more slots by putting in a sub panel doesn't mean you've created more ability for that box to still take in more electricity.
So in this market, it's interesting because we're seeing sellers that want to do the least amount of stuff and literally buyers that just like, okay, what's the minimum I need to get to the finish line because they want the house. And then you have like, I had one yesterday that closed all cash. It's got Federal Pacific panels.
Oh, yeah, no, those panels are recalled.
And I'm like, you need to have the electrician out here to change that right away, you know. But they gave us some pushback, and we're going to actually cancel the contract when we made the request to change the Federal Pacific panels.
So I got a question for you. I'm in due diligence. I get a report that says I have a problem with my panel box. An electrician comes out 3 days later. He finds a big issue. So now we need to replace the panel box, do some other wiring changes. I'm outside of my due diligence. Can I still get out of the contract?
You have to do all of your due diligence, including having the electrician there to take a look at it to see what you're going to do within that inspection time. So if you need more time to actually get numbers, you have to extend the inspection period, or you have to make your request within that inspection time.
So if I have the inspection, electrician or plumber or whoever comes out after the fact, finds a bigger issue, but I'm after due diligence. Now I can't get insurance on the house. I'm still forced in the contract?
So it doesn't really go like that. So typically we would see things like, okay, you have double taps and you have a Federal Pacific panel, right? Whatever's in the inspection, our request is going to be very specific. We're going to say, fix the double taps, fix the panel. So if they find something later, it's not going to be anything that we can deal with in that contract.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's not. And the contracts were rewritten recently, so they've gotten a lot tighter and a lot stricter on the buyer side, so they can't get out as easily. There's a bunch of other information and language in there that has changed. So, and that happened within the last year.
Yeah, unaware of that.
Yep. All right, I'll give you a red line contract. You'll probably appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I would like that.
All right. This is Tampa Home Talk. We will get into the nitty-gritty of all the stats next week. And I think we have Tom Brubaker rejoining us. Tom Brubaker.
Tom Brady?
Yeah, well, wish. Yeah, it'd be so fun. All right. Tampa Home Talk, 813-377-2775. We will be back next week with Leo. We sure missed him. Welcome home.